as a quick companion to the previous episode, which I called Tigray v. Abiy, or Abiy v. Tigray, I might just focus in on Dr. Abiy himself for this episode. And he's an interesting guy. You know, he's not a nothing sort of person. He's a something sort of person. And whenever I see his picture or anything like that, he seems to have substance. He seems to be somebody. He's not a nobody. He's not a puppet. You know, maybe there were people who put him into power who thought, let's get a nice pretty puppet in there, but he ain't no puppet as far as I can tell. He's a consequential person, all right. So he's got something. He's got personal power, charisma. He's got it all, as far as I can tell. There have been other people in Ethiopian politics who have got it all. The one who, more than anybody, had it all, as far as I have ever sort of felt, was Tedros II, an emperor in the 1800s. He was just a whole... let's say in any country you've got a whole lot of great people, great emperors and all that sort of stuff, you know, and they're all here. Tedros was just up here. As a man of charisma, you know, a general, you know, a Julius Caesar type, you know, an Alexander the Great type, you know, except in a smaller pond. But, you know, had he been in Greece or Rome, you know, I think he would have been at a level, you know, he'd be famous like Caesar. You know. All right. So, but Dr. Abiy, he seems to be he's not a Tedros, I don't think, because that Tedros had it all. You know. He's, you know, and there's been good emperors, you know. Well, when I say good, not good, like they all did lots of killing and all that sort of stuff, you know, not that sort of good. But Dr. Abiy seems to be, you know, one of the big figures. I think he'll go down in history as one of the big figures in Ethiopian history, not someone you just ignore. And as to, you know, and they're in the middle of a war, a civil war of sorts at the moment. I don't know if it's going to go, you know, develop into a full-blown civil war. It's got that look. But Dr. Abiy is, now, you know, is he a Hitler? Or was he actually trying to do a good thing? You know, when he came into power, you know, it depends on who you talk to, probably, over there. Okay, so that's that. Okay. Now, my gut feeling all along has been that he's one of those people who came in and wanted to do something good and had a good vision and all that sort of stuff. A good vision, not the only good vision. It's a bad vision for people who are disenfranchised by it. Whatever his vision is, it really doesn't matter for the purposes of this episode, because we're talking about Dr. Abiy, not Ethiopian politics here. But, you know, he strikes me as a kind of Mugabe type, in as much as, you know, I think Mugabe, you know, he had a vision where, you know, he wanted to do something good, but then the situation was, you know, it couldn't be governed. You know, he couldn't be you can't stay good in some countries. If you want to lead a country, just the forces within that country force you to flip from, I'm going to be a saint, you know, and I'm going to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people and all that sort of stuff. My vision is such that yes, there will be people who lose in the equation, but overall the greatest good will occur for the greatest number of people. And I get the sense Mugabe might have been that sort of person, but then the country just wasn't set up for that, and he was forced to, he slowly descended into, you know, tyranny. Maybe Dr. Abiy was like that, you know, because I know he's a born-again Christian or something, and he did seem at the start to genuinely want to do a good thing for Ethiopia, for the greatest good for the greatest number of people, you know, which the vision he had, you know, arguably might have been a good one. Bad for certain little pockets of Ethiopia, bad for the Tigray region, apparently, his vision. They didn't like it from the start. But if you are one of those people who think, well, there's always going to be someone who's going to lose, arguably, I've got to get going, take another scorpion. Arguably, yes, there was going to be losers, and of course, whoever the loser was going to be is going to say that he's a Hitler, but maybe an outsider like me would judge, well, yeah, all right. His vision was going to cause the most good possible in Ethiopia for the most number, for the greatest number of people. And yes, 10% of people were going to be a lot worse off. That might have been his motivation. Forget the previous episode. It might not have anything to do with all that complex, tribal inferiority complex and all that sort of stuff. It might have. It might have had nothing to do with all that. Apparently Dr. Abiy wants to bring in some sort of civic federalism, well, he has, to replace what was there before, which was something much more like an ethnic federalism. Right. Get rid of all the ethnic tribes and everyone be one. Now, I took pot shots at, why he might want to do that. And my pot shots were all psychological, individual psychology of people in different tribes and group psychology. That was my previous episode. That might not be the big thing. That might not even be the reason. Just because I make an episode suggesting that might be a reason, it doesn't mean that it has to be the reason. It's a reason, and it might be a wrong reason. The reason might be that he had a good Christian idea following in Jesus' footsteps, for all I know, in which, Jesus would have said we are all one. He might have been thinking like that. It might come from his Pentecostal sort of background. And this idea of one Ethiopia, so that you no longer had all these, tribes, tribal rivalry and all that sort of stuff. Get rid of that, because that's been causing disasters for 3,000 years. Let's have this beautiful one Ethiopia vision. He might have only been thinking like that. All that Amharan inferiority complex and Oromo inferiority complex stuff that I talked about in the episode might be mostly a load of crap. I said there that, maybe Amharans are feeling, Tigrayans are always saying that we're a lesser tribe and all that sort of stuff. Like in my mind, the Oromo people are. Now, I've got people who completely disagree with this, but, from my scant observations, the Oromo tribe, as they self-identify. Hello, you there? The Oromo tribe is a modern concept, but it's a super tribe made up of peoples from all other sorts of tribes that went before. So it's an amalgamation of tribes, like a whole lot of footy teams amalgamating into one footy team, which happens. And that amalgamated footy team is sometimes a very good thing. I mean, I know of a culture which is actually an amalgam of many cultures, and that culture that I'm talking about, the super culture that I'm thinking about, is an amazing culture, and it's called Western culture. Now that's a mixture of all sorts of things, English people, Canadian people, French people, all that sort of stuff, Americans. And it's an amazing culture. Now, just because it's an amalgam of all sorts of cultures doesn't make it somehow a watered down culture. In fact, Western culture as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So, there is an argument to be had that the Amharan culture, if you're an Amharan, you are bigger than the sum total of what was great about all the little tribes, that went into that pot. The Amharan culture, arguably, the Amharan culture is arguably a more amazing culture and tribe than all the tribes that went into it. Because it's a kind of a merged culture, anyway, that's another, which is completely the opposite of what I said in the previous episode. Because, when I speak, I'm giving ideas but they are ideas. You know, if I give an idea, it's an idea, but it's not the idea. You know what I'm talking about. But Dr. Abiy, you know, maybe forces, political forces, ethnic forces, and all those sorts of things in Ethiopia, you know, are pushing him to be a Hitler. That's a fair possibility, given that he's a born-again Christian. Maybe there's no other way. Maybe you can't be a leader in what we call Ethiopia without resorting to suppression. There was another leader, Meles. I'm not going to use local accents and say things like Melish or anything like that, you know. And apparently, if you say Tigray, you're supposed to say Tigray and Tigray, you know. But I don't get into accents. Otherwise, I'd be saying Wagner and Bach instead of Wagner and Bach. But I say Wagner and Bach. Yeah. All right then. So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Meles. I think he had a noble vision for Ethiopia when he got what was called an ethnic federalism in place. He had a noble vision, but by all accounts he had to resort to suppression in the end and do some really suppressive things. Excuse me, oh, what's going on there? Don't worry about it. He had to do some really suppressive things. You know, maybe Dr. Abiy is finding himself in a very similar situation to that situation that Meles found himself in. That, listen, I don't want to do the repression, but there's no other way. There's no other way. Anyway, that'll do for that episode. My time is up. I'll just mention that. Overnight I hear news. Every night I hear news from Ethiopia because I listen to the BBC World Service overnight. And there's been a massacre overnight in some town. Apparently people have been hacked to bits. Women, children, the elderly. I'm sure we'll get more detail as time goes on. That's bad, isn't it? A massacre. But in these situations, and you know, it really doesn't matter which side did it and which side was the victim. You know, that'll be the stuff of argument between the two sides that are battling at the moment, you know, but that's almost expected, unfortunately, I think. You know, like one side will now say, look, it's yet to be verified who did all the slaughtering. I think it happened a couple of days ago, actually, and it's just come to light with verified photos and videos and all that sort of thing. Amnesty International knows how to verify these things. Now, look, there would have been perpetrators, and there would have been victims, you know, and the belligerents in the war at the moment, you know, will be accusing each other of atrocities, you know, but I don't think either side in such a battle is going to be the good guy. We've just got a clash of visions here, and you know, atrocities are bound to pop out of all of that. It's not, you know, whoever is the most, you know, like, I'm sure there's going to be brutal people on both sides, you know. Neither side is the good guy usually in a situation like this, and neither side is the bad guy usually. Each side will call the other side Hitler, you know. I think that's the way it normally goes. Look, sometimes, you know, one side goes nuts and does most of the brutality. You know, like the Nazis on the Jews and all that sort of stuff. Or was it the Tutsis on the Hutus and all that sort of stuff? And then, yeah, all right, you can say one side's the bad guy. But even in a place like Rwanda now, I don't think the Tutsis are the evil ones. Evil, but you know, they're societies where they're just trying to get along again now, are they? In Rwanda, I haven't heard from Rwanda for a long time, but yeah. So there was a massacre last night, you know, but it reminds me of the Armenia-Azerbaijan battle, war that's going on at the moment, as well, yet again, because that one I have been listening to, and you just listen to the Armenian side, and and the reporters go in there and they say, listen, we've just been to Azerbaijan and all the mosques have been bombed. And the Armenian guy says, oh, fake news, come here, I'll show you all the churches that have been bombed on our side. And then the reporter goes back to Azerbaijan and says, oh, listen, I've just been over to Armenia and all the churches are bombed. And the Armenian and the Azerbaijani guy says, oh, fake news, they probably bombed it themselves to make us look bad. Come and have a look at all these bombed mosques. And the reporter says, oh, I saw them last time, forget it. That's what happens in battles like this, and it'll be the same with the Ethiopians, I'd guess. The people on the Ethiopian federal side will say that the Tigrayans have done all these atrocities, and the Tigrayans will say that the federal government has done all the atrocities and that Abiy's Hitler. And then, the Ethiopian hierarchy, the federal government will say, well, Meles was Hitler last time and he was on your side. And they'll say, your side, and the reporters go, it's like a tennis match, But it's very bad. And sometimes I stop and think, wow, just a couple of days ago, while I was having a coffee, a whole lot of people stormed into a village. That looks like what has happened in Ethiopia somewhere, in the last couple of days, and they've dragged women, children, and elderly people out of the houses, like someone coming into my house here, just dragging us all out physically into the street right here, and machetes maybe, and fucking hack, the children, bang. That's the reports I'm getting. Just chopping people up. Is that what's happened? If it hasn't, it does happen a lot, that sort of thing. And it might have happened in Ethiopia again. That's the reports that are coming in from Amnesty International, at least. More details on that will follow, I'm sure. That'll do.